What was the first documentary?
I believe the first one was Rescue Me, A Home for Spot. It was a dog rescue documentary, and actually it's a decent story because it encompasses everything I like about the documentary filmmaking.
Hmm.
So initially, this was totally just a pragmatic thing. I'm gonna do this documentary. I'm gonna shoot the interviews in a like day or two. I'm gonna edit it in a week, and I'm gonna put it out and see what it does. Like, and that was it. That was it. I have no. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love dogs and all, but I had no real passion for
Hmm.
shedding light on dog rescues or anything like that. But I had a friend who owned acquaintance who owned a dog rescue in Vegas. It was one of the biggest ones there, and she had a fairly interesting story. So I was like, "Hey, could I come down and do some interviews with you and the people that work for you?" And she was like, "Yeah, sure." So I go down, and then something funny happened. Like while I'm doing these interviews and listening to these people who are just like super passionate and just like they love what they're doing, and they're not making much money doing it. They're just trying to help dogs, and it's super sweet, and it's hard not to get caught up in that. So you're sitting there doing these interviews, and like I'm freaking misty eyed, like interview after interview, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And then I put it together, and I edited it very fast. I think I spent 5 or 6 days on it, and I put it out, and I had no idea what it was going to do. And I believe those first couple of months it was earning like 1,000 a month, so, something like that. And then I was like, so it wasn't a thing where like, hey, I can make 1 or 2 documentaries a year and make a
Hmm.
living. But I'm like, man, if I can do these things in a couple of weeks, and even if they only make 1,000 a month or 500 a month, but over the course of the year, and say I have 12 of them, that's all of a sudden a thing, you know?
Well, yeah, and so then I think that you're making them yourself. But then you're starting to look for people to branch out to. So,
Yeah.
there's Jeremy, of course, who's probably the most prolific uh, of the people you've reached out with. There's me, who's probably the second, but I'm like really slow. And then there's been a couple other individuals with individual one up, or the gentleman JP over in England.
And yeah,
Uh,
yeah, because so I realized that I could do it myself, and I still continue to do a few on my own, but
mhm,
pretty early on, it became obvious that the the hardest thing to put together with documentary filmmaking, it is organizing the interviews, finding the interviewees, booking them, preparing the interviews, doing the interviews. That was the thing that was taking up the most time. And
mhm.
even though you're typically not paying the interviewees, but you're still, sometimes there's travel involved, either you to them or them to you. There's the time, getting out to shoot the B-roll. And I started realizing that, man, like the time in there, if I'm doing every single one, is going to take up too much of my time to make it financially viable. So I was like, I'm going to start taking on partners that can take on some of the production parts. So, like I have a partner like Jeremy Nori in California, and I was in LA at the time. But anyway, we'll brainstorm a topic, and then he'll go out, he'll book all of the interviews, he'll perform all of the interviews, he'll shoot all the interviews, basically taking the production part of it just totally off my plate. And then I'll do the post production and the distribution, and we work our back end from there.
Right, or it's, something like I brought you, I believe I said, "Hey, I wanna do rhymecology."
Yeah, yeah, and
Uh,
and
you
and
know?
you brought the project, like that was like, in that case, that was totally your project that
Mhm.
you brought to me. And then and you booked the interviews, you performed most of the interviews. I think I did a few, but
You did a couple shoots because I was working on Central Ave, I think, at the time, so
right,
you
right.
you covered a couple things like
But yeah,
Sekou and
and there's different things with different collaborators.
mhm,
For example, like oh, like working with you, we've done much fewer projects. We take longer making the projects. We're working a little more to up the quality of the projects, and hopefully break into a new plateau of or a new level of distribution.
right.
Because the thing is, and I'll be straight honest. So I had a good like 2019, 2020, but 2021, which is really, so the Amazon stopped taking documentaries in, I think it was February of 2020, but
Mhm.
it didn't really start hurting till about 6 or 7 months after that. Because, you still had all the stuff that you had just put up that was still earning, because with low budget, I mean, probably pretty much with any movies, your first like 90 days, your first 6 months is where you're going to make the bulk of the revenue of the lifetime of the movie for a lot of times.
Mhm.
So that first 6 months after they stopped taking docs, it didn't really hurt because we had just put out new ones and it was all it was all cool, and we had other platforms that were going. But now between then and now, I haven't been able to put. I think I've slipped in maybe 2 or 3 documentaries onto Amazon or IMDb TV since that no documentary thing. But for the
Mhm.
most part, none of them. And when you look at the revenue differentials, prior to that purge, I would say in 2021, the exhibition income saw a 40 to 50% drop just from the Amazon thing. I mean, yeah, I started getting more stuff on Tubi, and like they were seeing more money on Tubi. And in general, indie films are making more on Tubi. But when it comes to documentaries, and nobody will convince me different, they make more on Amazon, even at that 1 cent an hour. So, and I'd been trying to put on a positive face about it over the last, 6 to 7 months, but I'm just prepping a video, like an end of the year retrospective on everything that was produced in 2021 and what it earned. And honestly, I was kind of like, gobsmacked at like how little, because I wasn't thinking about it overall, because you still see monthly revenue from movies that are 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, which can make up a good chunk of revenue. And but then like the new ones, which typically are supposed to be making the most,
Mhm.
this year have made the least. So, my overall take home, like in 2020, would have been like 60% new films, 40% old films. But in 2021, it was like 10% new films, maybe less, and then 90%, maybe more on older films. So the Amazon thing, it, yeah, it's pretty, it's hurt.